So yeah, let's launch into it. So
It's good
the
for you.
first part is going to be more geared towards the piracy aspect. Uh, she cannot take much more, Captain Ghost. So
It's so
I
true.
was I was thinking what we would do is Atira and I would ask Nightcobb questions about sub operations and how that might relate. We'll sort of frame them in the perspective of the Star Citizen universe and how subs operate, how that might influence what pirates can do to be successful to not scare away the prey. And so I think the first thing that I wanted to ask you about is, you know, given that space is really vast and a lot of it is very open, kind of like how the larger oceans and everything are. How might that compare with what you do on a submarine as far as you're traversing the Pacific, traversing the Atlantic, and you don't want to you've got this big open space and you don't want to give away your position. What sort of strategies or tactics, and if it's classified, by all means, but how might that what you guys do relate to what pirates could do when crossing Pyro to get to where they want to be to operate, for example.
Gotcha.
I just want to phrase
Um,
when you said classified, you were like, by all means. By all means,
By,
don't.
yeah, by all means, don't. Yeah, let's not pull a what is it, World of Tanks or
this is not DCS or what? No, it's not actually DCS is the one with the problem. It's War
No, it was
Thunder.
World of
This
Tanks.
is it,
War Thunder.
no, it's War in
Oh,
Oh, it
War
was a War
Thunder.
Thunder.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because they have
No, this isn't War
the
Thunder.
combined arms. Yeah.
Yep.
yeah. You're about to get that promotion. We
that-
don't want to screw it up for you.
No. I'll keep
No.
it. I'll keep it the obvious low intel stuff. So the big thing, and I've kind of talked about it before with submarines, that would be similar, right? It is a vast ocean. So yeah, you can obviously everybody knows, sonar is what you use to try and detect other submarines and even other submerged contacts. And you can obviously use it for surface contacts from underneath the water and on the surface. The tricky thing about submarines, I guess, kind of similar to your analogy, would be that, in the vastness of the ocean and with lacking, line of sight visibility and things like radar, because radar doesn't work in that scenario, your best bet for pointing yourself in a direction to look, because it's too vast of an ocean to just, drive around with sonar. Sonar has limited range. You've got the whole idea of like shadowing, depth layers, all that jazz, things that everybody knows about, like, and similar, to Star Citizen would be just, okay, well, if a 360-degree ping was all you got, and it had a limitation to it, like you can ping out to 360 degrees, but it's not a good ping. The odds of finding a contact at a certain distance with that ping, because you're searching such a wide area, is low. You would want to focus your efforts and try and get a more accurate representation of a given area of space. Well, with the vastness of space and the vastness of the ocean, what you're really relying on is your best guess. And your best guess, I hate to say it, it's a big cheat. It's, well, where were they last surfaced? Where were they last known to be? What are the likely places for them to go? Like, what have we known them to do in the past? Where does it make sense for them to go? We will start by looking for them there. What is their standard mode of operation? So the way I relate it to Star Citizen, and I don't know if you guys watched the Mongrel Squad videos. Do you guys watch them? They're like the
I have
infamous
watched a few of them.
pirate
Yeah,
group.
yeah.
They've
And
just put
Mongrel
one out.
Squad was on Space Tomatoes podcast a while back, and they made some really good points. So if you haven't watched that podcast, I would recommend going and checking it out, because they're the way they operate is very intelligent.
Yep. Well, similarly, right? Their big thing is they essentially use scouts, and that's not far off from what we do. I mean, granted, it's, as Atira will probably talk about later, right? It's a collection of intel picture that basically you are privy to, and you basically say, okay, well, I know where this person was the last time they exposed themselves, because we live in a world of satellite imagery, human intelligence. Like, that's not a secret to anybody and all that kind of stuff. So the bottom line is the way you stay hidden as a submarine is you run silent, you run deep under the water where satellites can't look at you. And it's one of the premier ways to hide yourself. So your best bet in Star Citizen would be, okay, I'm out in the middle of the black where nobody will look for me. Mm-hmm. That keeps you hidden to start. But ultimately, right, from on the pirate side and those that are hunting the pirates, the way that you reveal yourself primarily is by going to a location where you can be seen, or you are more likely to be seen. So, you go to Brio's breaker yard, or you go to a landing zone, or you go to, a common place to pick up cargo, something along those lines. You have to know that you're exposing yourself so that somebody could find you, and then make a logical best guess about where to look for you next. And if they observe you long enough, then they can make a better educated guess, maybe better educated enough to figure out how to place a, quantum snare in a given location. Sorry. Ghost Dog's unhappy.
Oh no, poor Ghost Dog wants to be on the camera.
I know, she knows. It's like she knows. She's like, "Are you on camera? Please.
Can I say hi to your friends?
Please, please, please." Yeah, exactly. That's
I'll let you take your turn here in a second, but I wanted to sort of highlight two things that you said that I thought were really interesting. When you talked about going deep, I think one thing that a lot of players will make the mistake of doing is flying through space along the ecliptic, where the majority of traffic will be in order to get to their destinations. And staying, even if they don't follow the same ley lines, from one place to another, they go off and like this, by, just making that small deviation, that might not give you the separation you need from people who are looking from you. But, people forget that space is three-dimensional, just like for, if you're of the silent service, the sea is three-dimensional for you compared to if you're on the surface Navy. And I think a lot of people will make the mistake of not flying below or above the ecliptic in order to get to where they want to go and avoid a lot of the scans that you're talking about, to Ghost 1800 brought it up in chat, the comm stations. We don't know if there will be things that the pirates are operating in Pyro that take that sort of replace comm stations from Stanton. We don't know how that's going to work, but there could be devices that the pirates have out in their areas around the stations that they control, because we know that some of the stations, besides Ruin, are controlled by the different pirate organizations, and they may operate comm stations or some sort of other sensor platforms. If those are all, sort of in a orbit around the station they control, but maybe not so much in the vertical sense, away
they're all
from the
on the same axis essentially.
Yeah, that could be a really good way to
there's an easier way to do
detection.
That, though. I think the reason people don't get off the eclipse or the ecliptic is because they have to slow boat it up. This is not 2.6. You can't just jump into quantum drive at any point and go straight up. Right.
Yep.
You have to slow boat it up. So the middle ground there is to go halfway to another planet and stop, and then change course and go where you're actually trying to go.
Oh, and with the quantum travel refactor, we should be able to do.
It might help.
Yeah, that a lot easier.
That'll help a lot.
I think it's going to be a hard habit for a lot of us to break, and I think because the majority of the other thing is the majority of the things in the star system are on the ecliptic. The planets and moons, some of them are off to varying degrees, but you could go well.
It comes back to players only have a certain amount of time, and they want to, and this cargo drivers too, they want to go as fast as they can from point A to point B to turn profit.
Yep. And as Akira knows, what that does is it builds you into a routine. And the moment that you adopt a routine, you make yourself basically a target for intelligence gathering.
Absolutely.
Get ahead.
Absolutely. Now,
God.
Sorry. We'll get there. He's going to go into more detail. At least I hope.
I will, sure, yeah, absolutely. I do want to follow up though, Nightcap. So, but most of the stuff you're doing on a submarine is passive, correct?
In terms of
Looking for bad people or the
yes,
opposition or for
yes,
The
anybody,
detection
yes,
part.
right? So
yes.
this is
yeah.
one of the things that that's kind of frustrated me a little bit about Star Citizen, and that's every ship has its signature, and we do have some level of passive. Well, I feel like our passives should be a little bit more effective, I guess. And I don't know how you balance that, but
I
you
think
don't
they're
have to
incredibly
ping.
effective.
You think so?
Actually, I want to degrade them.
Okay.
Well, here, this
I
goes back
guess
to
I
the
think about it
detectability.
900 years in the future, and I think about what a passive antenna listening would be able to do 900 years from now compared to the crap we have today.
Well, so I'll talk about that real quick. I meant to talk about this earlier. I'm glad you brought it up. So here's my struggle with passive sensors that I feel like Star Citizen could be potentially missing out on a good opportunity. Right now for sensors, you get full 360. And I say 360, keep in mind, like you said, three-dimensional. But bottom line is every axis away from your ship, you have full visibility essentially on passive sensors. Then not only that, but if I throw out a ping, I get, a 360-degree ping, I essentially get the entire bubble around my ship. What I've never liked about that, that corresponds to kind of submarining in real life, right, is you never get the shadowing that is inherently present by the fact your ship's engines, and honestly to a degree, but much less so, your ship's engines should really affect that. Bottom line is that should create basically a distortion bubble where your sensors are not effective. Like it's why planes even these days, right? Their radar is in the nose of the plane typically, and it is angled out in front of them in a cone. And, even if you could rotate the radar 180 degrees to try and see if somebody was coming up behind you in a plane, like you would have to accept that the noise and distortion from your engines that they will inherently make, because you've got not only using it as propulsion, most engines are also tied to a generator in a plane anyway, right? So you're generating electricity and propulsion at the same time. That is going to create a field that is going to distort most sensor suites. And that works that way on submarines. You guys have heard it in movies and stuff before, like when you talk about somebody's in your baffles. Baffles are just the cone in the rear of the ship that is essentially blind because your engines, your propulsion systems are essentially destroying your detectability with your own onboard sensors in that cone, that arc. So ultimately, where you're the most vulnerable is, the rear of the ship, where your main engines are. Now, retros are kind of an interesting thing. I would love it if, we got to the level of detail. This is asking a lot of Star Citizen, so I don't expect to ever get this, by the way. But I would love it if that's how it kind of married up with real life is. If your retros are firing, maybe you're sacrificing some sensor, or you're suffering some sensor degradation in the front temporarily. Or if you're heavy into the maneuvering thrusters, maybe you're just overall not picking up targets at longer ranges because you've got a lot of thrusters firing, providing a lot of distortion. You're going to pick up less passive signals, or at the very least, you're going to pick them up at you're going to stop picking them up at a longer distance. So maybe, the guy that would be detectable to you from a longer range as you're coming up on him while he's just driving in a straight line and you're coming at him from, perpendicular, you're off to his starboard side, maybe he picks you up at 10 kilometers if he's just flying in a straight line doing nothing. But if he's in a dogfight and he's jinking all around the place, utilizing his 6 degrees of freedom, and he is burning all of his maneuvering thrusters, mains, retros.
Freedom?
Say again?
You said freedom.
Did I say freedom? 6 degrees of freedom. I apologize.
Freedom. You corrected yourself. I just wanted to highlight that it was fantastic.
Freedom.
It's a new resource that's going to be in 319 for the mining update.
Look, that's what we produce in America instead of steel, my friends.
That's right. That's an American resource. Freedom.
Freedom.
Yeah, I don't sweat sodium. I sweat freedom. If you lick me, I taste like freedom when I'm at the gym.
That's right.
No, but that's actually a really cool.
Tree just earned himself an OnlyFans account.
I know he did.
No, but
It's called freedom. Freedom.onlyfans.
That's
no, but that's a really cool idea, though.
Night.
Is if you are maneuvering, or even if you're flying in quantum, having your visibility on sensor profile, significantly shrink, not because you're taking power away from it, but because you can't reliably, your reliability score for anything beyond,
we don't have anything on sensors in quantum anyway.
Well, I think that's more of a limitation of the game, but I think like going forward, whether you're in quantum, however you're traveling, if you're creating, throwing out all sorts of, electromagnetic interference because you're burning your thrusters, or you have a quantum field engaged, I think that's a really great way for them to balance that gameplay. You're moving fast and you have momentum and maneuverability, but you have less visibility versus someone who's sitting there passive, but at the same time that person is more vulnerable because they're not moving. And so you could, however you want to dial that between regular maneuvering and quantum maneuvering, whatever. But I think that'd be a really cool way to implement something like that, especially for smaller ships
NPCs
compared to larger
have this
ships.
Problem too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I'll tell you what, we can't have perfect NPCs that get no interference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because of these things, if they're going to apply it to us.
Yeah.
Yep. So back to your original question, though, Atira, about active versus passive. So yes, the big thing, and I hope they keep. I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it's still a thing. I've tried to test it, and I can't tell the difference with the current state of the game. Like you just said with the NPCs, they're kind of wishy-washy. But if you're doing like space bounties, right? The idea would be if I'm in an eclipse and I'm running up against ERTs, the last thing I would want to do would throw out an active ping, because if I threw out an active ping, I just gave away my position.
Where you are.
Exactly. Yeah. They should know exactly where I am at that moment. And the big problem with that is I think it used to be functional. I used to see it on other people's radars or on my own radar from players. When somebody would throw out a ping, you'd see the blue
bubble
ring on your radar.
Yeah.
You'd see the blue ring bubble go on your radar.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'd be like, ooh, there's a player pinging over there. And I'd go that way.
And I hate that mechanic. But I think there are other ways they could do that mechanic. And I think it comes down to a visual on your radar bubble that is a bearing.
Yes, I agree with you.
Right? Because I think the idea that your suit generates the blue wave for you and you can see that, I think that's stupid. But if you're paying attention to your radar and you see a little wedge appear,
instead of giving you a circle on the radar, it just gives you an arrow.
Because remember in the early ping, right, a big wave would come off the ship, and it was ridiculous, big blue wave.
Yeah.
Instead, on your little ball, you get a little 3-dimensional, inside the ball, a little 3-dimensional ping that says somebody from that, because it's part of the UI, that a ping was that way. You don't necessarily know how far, but you know the direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and so it's just intel. And I'll talk about why that would be really good later.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I think it was a little too obvious in terms of UI.
Yes. Oh, yeah. All right. So, okay, I'm going to ask a follow-up question, and I want you to be very broad, because I know that the real answer is probably inappropriate. So you could say a lot or a little, something silly. So when you go from like the passive listening, which is what we do most of the time in Star Citizen, to banging away, right? You are looking for a sonar contact, active sonar. You're going to target somebody. You're going to shoot something at them, right? How much further are you seeing across, how much are you getting? A lot more range in how far you can see, or are you getting a little bit more range? And I say this from the perspective of, in Star Citizen, should a ping be more than effectively maybe 20 kilometers, right? Oh, there's Ghost Dog. There he is. He's adorable.
There.
She's adorable. Is it she, right?
Yeah,
She's so pretty.
I know, sweetie.
Oh, makes me miss my doggos.
Because we get.
You see her trying to pet me. She's like, "Your nails are sharp."
You're a good boy. You're a good boy.
Yeah, I know, right? She's upset because she's not getting any attention. So let's see. I'm gonna try and run this through a brain filter.
Yeah, run it through the brain filter. Should we see a lot more? Should we see only a little bit more?
So I'll put it in terms of this and what I think Star Citizen should be like.
Okay, I like it. Let's do that.
What I think is in Star Citizen, if you throw out active pings, what you should get are more accurate locations of readings within the same range that you have passive sensors for. So what you're doing when you throw out an active is not giving yourself a broader location. And this is kind of where the fail is in terms of passive sensors. And I think what I was kind of trying to allude to, I just didn't say it clearly. Passive sensors should give you they're around this area, but I don't have an exact bearing. Active sensors are what you use to determine, it's not just a amorphous cloud of
noise.
It with a potential signature right there. There it is. I've got something in there. And they kind of did that for a while, right? And don't be wrong, there's a range which the passive sensor just like suddenly wins above all noise. And, you're just like, there's a target. I never even had to throw out a ping. And
sure.
My problem with that is you have to throw out a ping to get the amorphous. And then you have to dial it in.
Right.
I think it should be the other way around. It should start
the other way around.
Yeah, you should just already have the amorphous cube, the dots, the little dot things with a box.
So I feel like that would overwhelm the HUD when you're in a place. And maybe they could do that when they
you bring up a good point, because like if you're in an asteroid field, how would you be able to just even make sense of what's on your radar with all that feedback?
It'd be chaos. But I think if you bring in the new different radars, and the radars become an independent component, you have some radars that are tuned only to see ships, or they're best tuned to see that. And so you're not going to see a lot of that clutter. And then you have other radars that are tuned to see rocks and help you find rocks. So when you go into that field, you're overwhelmed, but you know what you're looking at because you're specifically looking for rock formations. Yeah. And then I don't know how you do salvage. I don't know. I mean, maybe salvage is actually a ship radar, but different because it's looking for something different. I don't know. But no, I get what you're saying though, Night Cobb. That makes a lot of sense to me, is that you start with a whole lot of amorphous and then the ping brings it right to what you want.
Yeah. And that should be the trade-off, right? And honestly, so now they're talking about you can take ship components out. And what I've noticed is radars are components. Yeah. On some of the newer ships, like that's actually a thing that you can go to a component bay and it comes out. They haven't started making variable component radars yet, but man, I'm dreaming of the day where that gets added to the list. I hope it does, because it would be really great to make us invest in trade-offs where it's like, this radar, size 1 radar, has a really great passive sensor, but it doesn't have a good active sensor. So, you can't scan well. And I think that should go along with active radar, active pinging, right? It doesn't have a good scanner. It doesn't have a good active ping, or maybe it's got a limited range on active ping, but you've got better passive abilities. So you might detect more information as a whole without giving yourself away. And that would be like an ideal one to have in an Eclipse, but
better filters or something, for information. Yeah.
Yep. And maybe that is the case. Maybe you have specific radars. Maybe you got a generic one that most ships start off with, but then you can buy like, this is a better salvage radar. It's better at picking up ship hulls, ship materials, and so on and so forth. And maybe it's got even an added bonus of like, makes it also actually really good at picking up other ships. Maybe it's got a really crappy, scan that's limited in what it can pick up. Maybe the scan's not good for picking up weapon details or shield components, or what the specific loadout of the ship is that you're coming across, but it's really good at picking up what kind of materials it's constructed from, or whatever.
It's good at seeing the ship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that we have to
And
make compromises on that kind of stuff.
So I have a
what are your
question.
thoughts on? Oh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tree.
Well, so remember, it was a while back. They had that video where they were showing how if you could hide a ship behind an asteroid, or you
Yeah.
could hide a ship behind a ship, or if you have a cluster of ships, you wouldn't be able to differentiate between what they were until you got close enough. Based on your experience, how realistic is that? Like how what in in submarines, say you're not operating, out in the wide open ocean, but you're closer to shore or land masses or something like that. Do you use obstructions to hide your signals? Is that a thing?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I guess what I'm asking is how
And
much
more
do you
importantly,
think?
it's something.
Oh, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say it, like they're within, say, the Pyro system, there's only the one asteroid field, but that we know of. There's the Akiro cluster. We know that there's going to be Lagrange points like we have now in Stanton, which will have some asteroids, some gases and everything. And we know that those are designed to interfere with your sensor abilities. I don't know how much it
Yep.
plays into it right now, just because I haven't messed with it, but I know that's part of the design.
Yep.
How much do you think that should play into, say, comparatively, like with Nix, where Nix has two large asteroid belts like the Air and Halo, with one of which has basically a gas cloud all the way through it, all the way around the system. It's a nebula. How much do you think that should degrade sensors, both active and passive?
It should degrade passive sensors to a large degree. And what I like about it, it should still degrade active too, just not as much.
Yep.
What I like about that though is, and I think it should be definitely a thing. Like I think, the radiation storms and pyro and
That was the
the
other thing I was gonna
various
add,
environments.
Yep.
Yeah, and I honestly, my big problem with asteroid fields these days is I feel like it's still too easy to detect a ship in a dense. If you're in the asteroid field around Yella, you should have to get close. You should have to search, and not only that, but you should have to like potentially compromise your own location by throwing out a ping to try and differentiate more asteroids from ship hidden amongst asteroids, because it's very much a thing in real life. In terms of the submarine thing, we call it high contact density. When you have high contact density, it creates a lot of noise. It creates a lot of shadowing. Especially when you're passive sensors, you are basically dependent on how you position yourself, how they're positioned to triangulate and verify one contact versus three, two contacts versus one. And then not only that, but if they're close to each other, what it's really hard to do is figure out, okay, well, I've got two contacts, but I can't, with the shadowing and what's going on, I can't figure out what one is doing versus the other. So I can't get a good bearing and a measure of intent for one contact versus the other. This one might be coming straight at me. This one could be cold and flying away. I don't know. Like when there's a high enough contact density and I don't have good sensor picture. So the idea for me would be passive sensors only provide you so much. And if you want with interference, it should be double, triple, quadruple. So the good news is that is a sword that should always cut both ways. So if you're looking to hide, that should be a refuge. That should be to your advantage too. And the goal would be to try and position yourself in such a way that you maintain the advantage of being able to maintain a passive sensor on them, or at least a better sensor picture on them, while making it as hard as possible for them to achieve the same on you. And that would be the idea of, like, I'll use something real basic. It gets a little bit more murky, pun intended, if we're talking about like in a gas
Nebulous.
cloud or Lagrange point. Yeah, nebulous. There you go. I love that word.
I do.
But in an asteroid field, it's all about, you might be able to find a position where an asteroid shadows you, but you can maintain track on a target. And that would be your goal. Like what provides you the best line of sight for your sensors while at the same time providing you the best shadowing. Now,
do you think that should apply to not only your, I forget what the terminology they use, but remember with the missiles, how you have missiles that will lock on to a radar signature versus
cross-section
the cross-section, as well as like, your, let's just say your electromagnetic signal, the thrust coming off your thrusters, the energy coming off your power plant. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, that was what it sounded. Yeah, go ahead.
So the difference though is I think as a sub, you're not searching for an electromagnetic necessarily output.
Correct.
I mean, you probably can, but really what you're looking for is sound in the
sound is
water that you like. Sound is king, right? So
I guess the surrogate for us would be the electromagnetic signal.
Yeah, sound doesn't travel in a vacuum.
EM signal, which is not necessarily now. You can hide behind a rock, but if the pirate or the target or whoever is not hiding behind a rock, there's no reason, or there's no, because the rock is just inert. So I could argue that like it should be degraded. Maybe it's bouncing around a little bit, but I don't think it should be significantly degraded.
See, I was thinking if for like you can't get the cross section.
I don't know.
You won't get the cross section return.
Right. So it depends, right? And that's
radiating.
Another thing the radars could be good at. The radar could be really good at seeing cross sections, or it could be really good at seeing an EM and seeing that, or it could be really good at seeing. You might have a different sensor altogether, because let's be real, it's a different sensor altogether that can see thermal, right? Because a radar doesn't see thermal.
And it is that right now, right in Star Citizen.
And now you have all
you
three.
Can see IR, EM, cross section, what you output, and ideally what the chipset would. But I think that's kind of broken right now. But you're totally right. And what you're talking about is what you would be limiting in the asteroid field example would be your ability to pick up on cross section in terms of radar. You can further limit. So that's where the gameplay aspect comes in, where it'd be like the submarine analogy would be, okay, well, I'm in deep water. Ooh, brain filter. Yeah. All right. So bottom line, there's thermal layers. There's thermal layers in water, right? Sure.
Absolutely.
Different density of water at various temperatures. So depending on thermal layers and stuff like that, right? It's kind of like being in a gas cloud or a nebulous cloud. You achieve some other measure of counter detectability. So you've got that part of it. Well, there's the other part of it is I need to be quiet. Like that's the other function is I track sound in a submarine. So that would be another way in which and that's how I track others. Let's be as quiet as possible. Let's alter our machinery lineups. Let's, run a given set of, or turn off a given set of equipment that changes my capabilities, but at the same time, it provides better counter detectability. So I'm balancing. This goes
back to our old Star Citizen stealth mode.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing though, right? So I'm balancing several different things on the submarine, even that I would still do on a ship. Okay, what's my engine output in terms of heat? What's my EM output? Are my shields up? Because if I take my shields down, EM output goes down dramatically.
Way down.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Is my quantum drive still spooled up? I need to take that down because that's also putting out a ton of EM. What can I turn my weapons off? They put off EM. So it's a matter of, okay, if I'm legitimately trying to hide, the idea would be I need to minimize EM, IR, and cross section. So you can do that environmentally. The other thing would be, right, and pilots do this, if you want to limit or confuse your IR signature, put yourself in the sun. It's a big ball of heat. You put yourself in front of it, nobody's going to distinguish your IR signature from the sun. That's how pilots in real life spoof IR missiles sometimes. They'll come from the sun. Those are all the things that you have to track. And the other obvious things would be, I don't want to be full burn. I don't want to be throwing on the afterburner. If I'm trying to minimize my heat detection, I want to minimize my maneuvering thrusters. in the use of those. So still is better. Hell, if I can turn the engines off and put myself behind an asteroid and just hope that I don't get counter detected. Those are the 3 ways in which you would be doing it. And it works very similar in the submarine environment. I'm just doing different mediums. You know what I mean?
It
I
also
think this
works
all really
in
highlights
aircraft.
the value
Yeah.
of having a scout.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
So we were, I was going to
Absolutely.
lead into that, by the way. The ultimate win, right, is you position yourself in such a fashion so that you are not detectable. And maybe you're the prime target, but then you have somebody, I don't want to say sacrificial, but maybe they're in a better stealth ship. So maybe you're the Carrick, and maybe you've got an Eclipse buddy, right? The Eclipse can afford to get closer. The Eclipse can sacrifice some of the advantages potentially provided by maybe they're not as worried about cross section. So it's just a matter of, I just need to get my EM and my IR low enough to detect from a distance. And I just can feed the other guy, the Polaris that I have hiding behind the asteroid, accurate bearing, range, target information until they're absolutely ready to strike, or the target is in a compromised position. And
Yeah,
now,
Or
absolutely.
you're just lying in wait, and once you get some sort of return on somebody, and you've narrowed it down enough to say, okay, this is a target, and it is a worthwhile or feasible target based off of this much energy being put off. Then your comm burst or whatever back to whoever who's way outside of range, but they're sitting ready. They've got your position put in, or some some sort of prepositioning set up, so that way they can quickly jump in, whether it's behind or something. It's almost like setting up your for a tier and I setting up your fields of fire for an ambush, or I forget the verbiage is, but like if you were to place mortars or artillery beforehand, and you are gauging, okay, how far out your shots are, going to be landing, getting it all zeroed in beforehand, you could do that with your,
it's called
your
ranging,
almost
isn't it?
forward observer type.
No, there's a specific artillery term for
Triangulating?
Pre-position target, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm brain farting about it. I learned about it when I was on a FSC.
But I think there's other.
I don't want to say fist,
there's a
but,
better term for it.
Yeah.
But
The fister is the guy who's calling it in. He's attached to like a company or a battalion and is responsible for all fires at that level. But yeah,
I used to do that. I used to do the math for the fister.
You used to be a fister? What?
I used to be a fister. I'm a reformed fister. Now I just do medicine.
You got all kinds of spice today. You want people to lick you? You're a fist man. Woo.
He's a fister, guys.
I've been away from my wife for 2 weeks.
Tree. Look, I'm not king shaming. I'm be clear.
No, live your best life.
Yeah. You do you.
You know what I think
judgment,
when you think about it, for if you're a pirate, or and this could be if for anybody who's trying to lay an ambush or catch somebody or something, I think for a long time a lot of players have been very concerned with firepower and maneuverability, and not so much concerned with detection and positioning, in terms of being able to detect someone before they detect you, and then you whistle for your friends, and here they come, and you've got them outmaneuvered, without even firing a shot, and that's how you could get someone to see the hopelessness of the situation, and surrender the goods without firing a shot. The ultimate piracy behavior is 100% profit, just via planning.
Yep.
Well, so let's be clear though. Anything that we're talking about here for a pirate can be used for a privateer.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It totally goes both ways.
Yeah, or a military or mercenary outfit who is hunting pirates. And this is one of the gameplay loops I think CIG is missing out on, and maybe we're not ready for it yet, and that's perfectly fine. But they need to allow civilized systems, right? You wouldn't expect to see this in Nyx or Pyro, but like in Stanton, for instance, those corporations are absolutely gonna. I mean, it's not bounty hunting; they're hiring you to go enforce the law, or win a prize, or do something, right? They're hiring you to go fight the enemy. and you get the spoils from that.
Yeah, it's mercenary work. It isn't bounty hunting.
That's privateering. Yeah, but in nautical terms, that's a privateer.
Yeah.
Truth.
And we deal with, right? And actually Congress, and I've talked about this in my privateering video, go watch that, all you people watching. We actually still have the in law, we can issue writs to civilians to go be privateers, but they haven't done it in like 200 years.
I think that's a great idea for a business venture. Night Cobb, I think when you get out of the Navy,
advocate.
we need to get our rich officer friend to fund a new
buy
venture.
a small dinghy. Mount a big gun on a small boat.
Down.
I have a EW friend in the Navy who's now the Space Force, who's perfectly willing to come on this adventure with us.
Sounds like so much fun. My wife would kill me.
Do you know how often I have to defend the Space Force? It's ridiculous.
But with that comes everything that you take should be yours as a privateer, more or less, and the government that hires you gets the skim off the top, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's definitely a gameplay loop, but it's like an official government-sponsored military operation to go take out a PvP or a PvE target.
Yeah.
And it might be one of the few times you get to keep the ship.
Honestly, in my opinion, that is what the current state of bounty hunting, if they transitioned the idea of that and fleshed it out a little more, that's really what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, it's not real bounty hunting. Bounty hunting targets are supposed to be brought in alive 80% of the time. Whereas, like, you tell me I have a group of targets, especially like the group targets. It's like, yeah, all right, this is pretty much privateering. I am being sent out to kill these guys, and no questions asked. And then now I can salvage their ships. And in 319, it'll get even better because I'll be able to salvage size 2 components and below and reap the spoils. And the only difference is I'm not paying a cut, of the spoils. Yeah. I'm just getting a straight up contract.
Real quick, chat, did the sound alert play for you guys? I heard it in my headphones. Did you guys hear it? McBadgers, thank you so much for the follow. Really appreciate it. Okay, sweet. Because I saw the little GIF thing. I had to add it like 3 different times while I was getting everything set up, and I don't really have a way to test it, so I just have to hope this works. Before we continue, I just wanted to check on that, but also towards the beginning of this stream, we got a $50 donation to stackup.org. I got an email for it. Somebody used the link, I think, on the thing on Twitch. I forget what it is. Not the Twitch charity. So I'm not sure who did it. It just came through as anonymous, but I refreshed the goal. So we got a $50 donation to stackup.org. So whoever made that donation, don't know if you're still watching right now. Thank you so much for that very generous donation. Really appreciate it. That's super awesome. Like the little gift says, veterans are our mission, gaming is our passion, and we reflect that here. So thank you for that. McBadgers says, you're welcome, Tree. It's Badgers from Inforunners in disguise. Oh, Badgers.
Hey, Badgers.
Hey. So thank you for joining us. Good to see you. I keep track of your stuff. I follow you on the YouTubes, but would Night Cobb, what would be like the is there like a Navy thing for coming across a fellow sailor? Is there like a tradition you guys do? Because Badgers is a
hail and farewell.
Hail and farewell, yeah.
I mean, like, don't be wrong, we don't have like a traditional greeting, but I mean, that's what we call it when we
hail, sailor. How are you?
No, but I mean, like, our traditional, like, if you want to get formal and like how you say goodbye to like a fellow sailor is like fair winds and following seas. But I don't really have a good
ahoy Badgers.
Don't do that.
The Brit Navy.
Don't do that again.
No, but
don't ever do that.
Badgers has always talked a lot about his experience.
I'm serious.
Yeah, and he's. I forget what you do exactly. I know you're sort of in the SAR industry now that you've gotten out of the Navy, but thank you for your service. And Badgers, if you're ever interested on coming in the podcast, we could have 2 sailors on here. Atira and I would be I think we could handle it for at least one episode.
They won't know. They won't know what to do with themselves. It'll be awful for them,
especially
not for me.
If Badgers is using
swabby talk.
Brit jargon. What did he just call me? I have no idea what that means. You guys know what that means?
He used the traditional term, right? Because they set all the standards for nautical terms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Badgers is your. I don't remember what your MOS was, but I'm pretty sure you were surface Navy. You weren't a submariner, so you.
I won't judge him too harshly for that.
Wait, isn't shipmate a derogatory term?
It is only if you let it be. And it depends on the tone, right, that you say it, right? If you say, "Hey, shipmate, how's it going, man?" Like that's a big difference from shipmate. Yeah, exactly. But
warfare
so
officer,
it's all about the tone. It's all about the tone.
We do the same thing with Devil Dog.
Awesome.
You can call that.
You just got raided.
Just got raided by.
Part of the crew.
Hey!
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Hey everybody.
Part of the crew.
All right.
We're gonna let the sound alerts go flipping nuts. You were right, Night Cobb. We did it right. Paul, thank you so much for the raid. Oh geez.
Thank you, Paul. I wasn't drunk.
Part of the crew. Part of the crew.
Just
Paul,
tired.
he was drunk.
No, I was tired. Leave me alone.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we got a follow command.
Part of the crew. Part of the crew.
I might have to disconnect the sound alerts for a few minutes because otherwise it's just going to go nuts. Thank you so much for the raid, Paul. Really appreciate it. I'm talking over the.
Part of the crew.
I didn't plan for this.
Noise.
You're gonna have to silence that somehow.
I don't know how to do it.
I appreciate all the follows, guys. Really do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This all goes to charity. Thank you so much, guys. Mental health is such a thing in the military these days, and honestly, this really means a lot. It's a real big problem in the Navy and honestly, specifically the submarine force. Yeah. So all this support is just huge. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, all of our hearts.
I don't know how to mute it.
We should just press forward.
I didn't.
Well, they can't hear us pretty well over the.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
The alerts. That's the problem.
Let's see.
Oh, here, I'm going to turn on the volume so I can hear the chaos.
Part of the crew. Part of the crew.
Keep the follows coming. I really appreciate it, but I am going to turn off the sound alert thing.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
Once he figures out how.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
Oh, you have a really long one too. Yeah, I've
He
never
does.
listened to it before.
I like it.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
I've never listened to it because I'm always talking.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Got so many follows now. There you go, Tree.
Part of the crew.
No, absolutely.
I don't know.
Paul
What
just
do I
blew
do?
you up, man.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
Paul, the bottle of bourbon is in the mail.
Part of the ship.
All right. So we really appreciate you. Yeah.
Part of the crew.
Unlike Tree's bottle of bourbon, which he still owes me. But that's okay. That's
I
okay.
just called
I know
you
what
out.
you're
So,
talking
God,
about.
what we've been talking about, if you can hear us at all, is
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
how we should be able to hide in Star Citizen to affect either piracy or bounty hunting, privateering type operations. We've been talking about radar sensors and how that translates to like what Night Cobb does in the Submariners.
Thank
Some
you
of
for the
things they
sub,
do.
Badgers. Really appreciate you. I think that's the last of them for now. I think that's it.
Ah,
Okay, so mental note: have to figure out how to turn those off in a pinch.
In a pinch?
That was nuts.
No, it's good.
Yeah, because I still don't know how to do that. For those of you who are just now joining us, Night Cobb and Atira and I, we have been talking. It's a two-part episode. We always do generally two-part episodes, and we're the first part, and we're nearing finishing the first part. We're talking about how predominantly piracy, but really it applies to anyone who is hunting for a target or targets, is how you can navigate space, with what is being developed for gameplay elements in Star Citizen, what they've talked about as well as locations, Pyro and Nyx, how you can navigate space and detect the prey, who you're looking for, whether it's a bounty, whether it's traders or something like that, and then detect them, lie in wait for them without them detecting you. Whether you're using space terrain, like gas clouds, nebula, asteroid fields, whether you're flying off the ecliptic, how you're managing your signals on your ship, your electromagnetic and IR signals, in order to not give away your position, how you're scanning for those targets without using passives versus actives in order to detect them without giving away your position, without scaring away the prey. Here we go. There's another one.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
And I do think it should be hard. It shouldn't be easy.
Oh, yeah.
You should have to practice managing your systems. I would really like to see them kind of push hard to get us radar components and upgrades, things that
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
excel at
Part of the crew,
one
part of the
thing
ship.
or a
Part
couple
of
of
the crew,
things.
part of
and
the man. Part
suffer
of the crew,
in
part
other
of the
areas.
ship.
I think that would be good. I think that would benefit.
Yeah. And to be clear, because I know a lot of people worry about it with Star Citizen, I am not advocating getting as in-depth to the sim environment that DCS does this, right? Like if I'm in an F-18 in DCS, it's not even, I have to constantly change the position of my radar, decide what mode it's in, various other things. And it's actually so much of a chore that it takes pretty much 100. I have to put the plane most of the time on autopilot in order to lock up a target sometimes that's moving fast, or it's in an area of, low terrain, possible counter detectability. And I'm not saying it needs to get quite to that level, but I would love the idea that, on the more passive approach of, hey, I can have a better radar, or I have a better chance of finding targets by just upgrading or changing out the radar, or being selective about what I use for a given scenario, and then just being aware of its capabilities and stuff like that. I would like to see a little bit more in terms of and I think this is honestly planned, just the idea of what you're doing, where you are, and how your position should just have a greater impact on all the various detectabilities, cross-section, EM, IR. And right now we're seeing very, very much the very beginnings, the tier 0 of that implementation. And I'm just, they need to dial up certain things, maybe take a few things into account in terms of ranges of detectability based on ship's action. There should be a compromise in all ways, right? If I'm in a dogfight and I'm constantly changing position, I really don't think I should have sensor detectability past 5 kilometers. At least not good. You know what I mean? If I'm on the outskirts of a fight and I'm doing like an OODA loop, and I'm not burning hard, and changing my orientation perpetually, then I should have better sensor detectability. And, maybe that can go out to 10 or 12 kilometers, and then obviously there's the variability of, well, what kind of signature is that other ship potentially putting out? So the idea being is, I guess my end goal would be, if I'm in an Eclipse, a Talon, a
Ghost.
Your ideal scenario is not sneaking up on a lone target, just hanging out in space, cruising along, because you should know that when it's not doing anything else like that, it's got decent sensor detectability regardless of whatever I do with cross-section, IR, positioning, EM. But if that lone ship, if that Carrack is involved in a dogfight and is burning, changing its orientation, but I'm 10 kilometers out, I should rest assured that I can close to a relatively short distance and deliver payload before it ever detects me. Or at the very least, its potential of detecting me is significantly lower. Right now, I don't believe we do that.
So
right
we
now,
did
it's just
talk, Zephyr, about low, high, passive versus active. We did talk about that earlier. And there's some of that, yeah.
And if you guys just came in, this will be up on my YouTube. Just youtube.com/ at tree0311 within the next week. So it's you'll be able to catch up on the conversation of what we've talked about and everything. And appreciate you guys coming and hanging out, because I think we talked a lot about maneuvering and doing those things and using sensors appropriately, using your ship appropriately to not give away your position. We talked about using terrain, space terrain for what it's worth, in order to both get to a position that's advantageous for you, but also to hide yourself.